This program starts now.
Hello everyone, this is Nilima. Welcome to the 16th episode of Hyderabad Runners weekly webinar series Beyond the Track. Hyderabad Runners, founded in May 2007, is the first group in India to institutionalize running with a mission to promote running as the preferred form of exercise. Hyderabad Runners has been doing this through many of its local groups and mentors all over the city, and have also been supporting running groups outside Hyderabad. As part of our initiatives to keep you constantly aware and educated in these uncertain and turbulent times of COVID-19, we bring you Beyond the Track, a live webinar series of conversations with some of the highly distinguished experts from running and related sports to help equip yourself with both knowledge and practical training. In this 16th episode of Beyond the Track, we are honored to connect you to Mr. Jon Dunham, an accomplished cinematographer, director, and an avid lover of sports. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Pavan Atukuri, one of the active members of Hyderabad Runners, to introduce and welcome our guest for today. Over to you, Pavan.
Thank you, Nilima. Today we have a guest who doesn't put a limit to his interests. He follows what he wants. It doesn't matter to him if he has to go to Australia, Europe, or North America. He just goes there and accomplishes what he wants. He has a breadth of interest he grows into and comes out as a winner every single time. No distance is too far for him to achieve what he wants to achieve. He went on a 600-mile trip for his first documentary involving 3,000 cyclists. It took 5 years to bring out his first film, Spirit of Marathon, which ran to packed theaters in Chicago International Film Festival and also won him an audience award. This film grossed $1 million when released in theaters in just 2 days. His latest film, Boston, released in 2017. It won critical acclaim. Academy Award winner Matt Damon gave narration, and an Emmy Award winner Jeff Beal composed the music for Boston. He's not just an award-winning producer, director, and cinematographer. Jon is an avid lover of sports and is an accomplished cyclist and a runner. He has competed in cross-country mountaineering biking events around the globe and is a veteran of 26 marathons. How does Jon connect running to filmmaking and vice versa? Let's hear it out from him and know what has drawn him towards filmmaking and running at the same time. Over to you, Jon.
All right. Well, I'd like to start just by saying thank you to Hyderabad Runners and all of you in India for inviting me to this webinar and inviting me to share my experiences, both as a runner and as a filmmaker. I know we have limited time here today in terms of what I can share with you, both speaking wise and I have some film clips I'd like to share as well. So I'll keep my comments brief because I want to save time at the end for people's questions. But I'll just give you a quick summary of how my career as again, both a runner and a filmmaker began. When I was very young, I was introduced to running in kind of an unusual way. I was literally a kid. And I recall vividly walking into our family room and my sister had on the TV the broadcast coverage of the Los Angeles Marathon, which was taking place. And I still remember these images of runners just taking over the streets of this major, metropolis of Los Angeles, and the visual aspect of that was really appealing to me. I thought it was something very unique. Some years later, I decided to run the race myself. Again, very young. I was only 15 years old, young and naive. I didn't realize you really needed to train for something like a marathon. I just decided to go out and do it. Which I did. My parents signed me up. I started the race, and having only run prior to the marathon distance, the longest I had ever run was 1.5 miles. I started the race, and I remember getting to about I remember starting the race and the, the packed crowds in there um, and moving it along at a very, very slow pace, and just thinking, oh, this is really easy. This is no problem at all. I can run this pace forever. And then I remember getting to about 10K, 6 miles or so, 6, 7 miles, and thinking, okay, I'm starting to feel this in the legs a little bit. This is getting interesting. And at some point, I remember thinking to myself, at that time, the course has changed quite a lot over the years, of the Los Angeles Marathon. But at that time, the halfway point, um, was on Hollywood Boulevard, in front of the famous landmark, Mann's Chinese Theater. And I remember thinking, okay, I just got to get it to halfway, and I'll get to halfway, and then then I'll walk a little bit and kind of reevaluate things. And I got to halfway, and I started to walk, and I just thought, oh my, what have I gotten myself into? Now it was a loop course. I somehow had to make it, another half marathon all the way back to the start, and I didn't know how I was going to do it. But I don't think it ever really entered my mind to quit. I just kept on putting one foot in front of the other, walked, ran, and eventually I got there. I got all the way to the finish line, and it wasn't an incredible time, but I was so elated with what I had done, that I had run my first marathon. And that it really, it sounds cliche, but it truly was a life-changing experience for me. That was in 1993, so here we are, close to 30 years later, and I still think about it. And it was truly a special moment in my life, and I continued to run marathons, and eventually, as I started my career as a filmmaker, I started making these films about the marathon. My first film, as was mentioned, was Spirit of the Marathon, a film that was based around the Chicago Marathon, but really kind of told the marathon story, from a historical perspective, and like what the marathon event is, as well as featuring people from different walks of life that we're getting ready for and that we're going to run the Chicago Marathon. Perhaps some of you there have seen it. I thought I would show you the trailer for that film, and then talk a little bit more about the production. So I'll show you the trailer to The Spirit of the Marathon right now.
I think we're made to run. We have these long legs for a reason. They're made to be used, and we're not forced to use our legs anymore.
The marathon is 26 miles, 385 yards, or 42.2 kilometers.
It's the perfect distance to truly test the human physiology, basically because of the amount of sugar we can have in our tanks.
He has come to an emotional and physical.
It's really a brutal distance, and the slightest things can make it a great event or make it disastrous.
But at some point in the marathon, the distance is greater than the human ability to physically transcend it.
So you go through that sort of mental struggle and physical struggle, and you say, geez, this is really, really hard, Going on now between Dick Berkeley and Alberto Salazar.
When I crossed that finish line, I had absolutely nothing left. I was completely shot and done.
You triumph over the adversity. That's what the marathon is all about. And therefore, there isn't anything in life that you can't triumph over after that.
I decided to take on the challenge of the marathon. I think I felt the need, it's the distance you need to complete. I felt like, I'm really a runner now and I can do this.
This is my first marathon. The reason I started running was that I had gotten severely out of shape. By the time my marriage came to an end, I guess I just decided that it was time to do something to get back the person that I used to be.
People ask me why I run marathons. I run it for the t-shirt. And they say, what do you mean? And I say, because that's my very subtle way about saying, hey, I did something that I feel that most people can't do.
The normal person, they want to make a body slim. But for us, we want to make money. Yeah. This is like a job, and I love my job.
When it comes down to it, I've never won any major marathon. I've never won a marathon. Ultimately, I need to win a race.
I had really reached a point in my life where I didn't think that I could ever be happy again. And this has really given me such a positive outlook. I think I can pretty much do anything.
Marathon is not a simple job. It's miles and miles. It's 26 miles. It's 42 kilometers.
You get a sense of kinship with these elite runners. You're running in their footprints. And that's awesome.
There are a few times when I've gotten a little panicky. I think, oh my gosh, I'm going to be running for 4+ hours. What was I thinking? That's insane.
You basically have to take 1 mile at a time and not look ahead to the finish line all the time because it's really far away.
I'll make sure that I'll be #1 this year.
There's a chance that I might not finish.
In the span of 26.2 miles, a lot of things can happen.
People talk about the runner's high. The only runner's high that I've really felt is when I stopped running.
When you cross that finish line, no matter how slow, no matter how fast, it will change your life forever.
Okay. All right. So that was Spirit of the Marathon. And Spirit of the Marathon, of course, was a very personal film to me. Being a runner, being a marathon runner, it was something that I worked long and hard on. It took me about 5 years to make the film, so I often referred to it as my longest marathon. I thought the physicality of actually running a marathon was difficult, and then starting the production of an independent documentary film, that was a whole new ball game, as we say. a very, very challenging effort. But I just kept on pushing forward because it was something important to me, and it was a story that I wanted to tell. I was very fortunate with the film, as was mentioned. It was released in cinemas, first in the United States and then Canada and elsewhere, and it did very well, both critically as well as financially. And it really put me on the map, so to speak, as a filmmaker. And so I had only really originally intended to make one film about the marathon. And then because Spirit of the Marathon was so successful, I was in the position that I had people that were willing to finance another production. And I thought, well, you know, there were things that I wanted to do with Spirit of the Marathon that I wasn't able to for financial reasons or time or logistics or whatever. And I thought, okay, well, you know, maybe I'll make another film. So I decided to make Spirit of the Marathon 2. And Spirit of the Marathon 2 is really a lot of the things that I had wanted to do in the first film, but I couldn't. So it's kind of a director's cut and kind of a different sense. And the primary thing that I wanted to do with the second film was film a marathon outside of the United States. And I eventually chose to make the film around the Rome, Italy marathon. So I'll show you a trailer for Spirit of the Marathon 2, and then we can talk about that just a little bit. So let me bring that up for you here. We're still back on Spirit of the Marathon. Let's bring up Spirit of the Marathon 2. Should be this one here.
The marathon is the biggest, totally peaceful community activity in human history.
Marathon is all about inspiration and triumph. It doesn't matter if you're trying to win the race. It doesn't matter if you're trying to overcome cancer. Every runner trying to pursue their own individual goals.
Sometimes you seem to get caught up in life and you forget to let people know just how much you feel about them.
У мене стоїть мета відібратися на Олімпійських іграх.
My father was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. My goal is to raise $1 million to help find a cure.
Se pensa agli anni non si arriva mai al traguardo.
Realizzerò un sogno correndo questa maratona, sì, sì, sì.
It's the journey that is probably the most significant, and it changes people's lives.
Marathon's about rebirth, regeneration, overcoming the impossible. That's what it's all about for each of us.
So there's a little glimpse at Spirit of the Marathon 2, and Spirit of the Marathon 2 is a very special film to me. You know, again, I felt very, very fortunate to have had the success that I did with Spirit of the Marathon, and then to be able to make a second film. But but the film brought me to Italy, to Rome, and I've always enjoyed being a documentary filmmaker. I've always enjoyed travel, foreign travel. I've enjoyed coming to India and spending time with Hyderabad runners, which I did late last year. And to come to Italy and to spend time in Rome and start to get to know Italy was a really wonderful experience for me, both as a filmmaker as well as personally. I just totally fell in love with Italy, and in fact, that was in late 2011, and I just decided to stay. So even though I'm American, I'm from Southern California originally. I've been based in Italy since essentially since late 2011, and I now have my family here, and Italy is home. So Spirit of the Marathon 2, while it's yet another running film, it was another step in my career as a filmmaker. It's a very personal film for me also, because it was really an important moment in my life in which I decided, when I fell in love with, and I decided to stay here in Italy. During the production, it was towards the end of the production of Spirit of the Marathon 2, I had already started to think a little bit about, okay, well, I've made 2 films about the marathon. Maybe I'll go ahead and make a third, and we'll just finish it off that way and kind of, make the marathon film trilogy. And for years, dating back to the first film, I, of course, when we think about the most prestigious, the most important, the most historic marathons run around the world, at the top of the list, of course, is the Boston Marathon. And I had done a little bit of filming at the Boston Marathon earlier during the production of the first film that I made, and gotten to know some of the people around it, some of the people that had been a part of the story of the race, champions. I had started discussions back then about maybe someday making a film about the Boston Marathon. And I was gearing up to do that toward the end of the production of Spirit of the Marathon 2 in Rome, when the bombings in 2013 occurred. And personally, my reaction to the bombings was, I thought, okay, well, we're not going to make a film now, at least not for a long time, because my interest was always in making a film about the race and the rich, long story of the race, and not about this tragedy that had occurred. But during that summer, after the bombings, I started to think forward to what the following year, 2014, was going to be like, and how it was really going to be extremely meaningful for people to come back the next year and to run the race again, for the city to unite. And I thought, this is really going to be a very important moment in the race's history, and somebody should document it, and I want to document it. So I decided to go ahead and pursue making a film about the Boston Marathon, which was really what I had always wanted to do, in that it's a film that tells the story of the race from how it started all the way through the 2014 race, and then also incorporates the events of 2013 as well. So I'll show you a trailer to Boston right now, and then talk about that a little bit. Why does it keep on giving us the wrong video? This should be Boston.
There's nothing
that compares to standing at the starting line of the Boston Marathon.
You look down Boylston Street, filled with people, flags from all nations.
There's a relationship between the participants and the spectators like no other marathon in the world. If I win this race, it will be a big honor. Johnny ran the Boston Marathon 61 times, finished 58 times. Imagine 58 years.
It's a labor of love. I'm going to keep going as long as I can possibly keep going.
Kyriakides was running to save his country.
As he crossed the finish line, he looked at his watch and he said, "For Greece."
It's not just an athletic competition anymore. You know, our race has helped save lives.
There was no money, but once I won Boston, that changed my life.
I heard a screech of a bus stopping, and I turned, and that's his face, the angriest face I ever saw. I went, ah!
Endurance means when it gets tough, you don't give up.
You fall down 7 times, you get up 8 times.
When a random person in the crowd screams your name and that they believe in you, that's can give you the power to do anything.
The first time since 1983, we are going to see an American man win the Boston Marathon. Oh, unbelievable!
On the third Monday in April, the world will return to this great American city to run harder than ever and to cheer even louder for the 118th Boston Marathon.
So that's Boston. And, you know, I feel very, very fortunate to have, again, been able to make the first and only feature-length film to tell the story of the Boston Marathon. Not unlike the first film that I made, it was kind of a long, hard journey. It took us about 4 years to make Boston from start to finish. A lot of challenges along the way, not unlike running a marathon. You know, you've got to be an endurance athlete to be a filmmaker. But so rewarding. And without a doubt, the fact that it did take as long as it did to make the film, it's a better film too. And you know, I'm very proud of it. And you know, I think it kind of perfectly rounds out what I eventually intended to do, which was, you know, make these 3 films about the marathon. I think I'd like to, you know, save the rest of our time now for questions that people have, and I'll do my best to answer as many of them as I can. So why don't we move to the questions now if you're all ready.
Thank you, Jon. That was a splendid presentation. We have a lot of questions coming up. The first question is, why a film on running in the first place? Why not other sports? Is there a cosmic connection, you know, or a divine calling that you made films on running?
Well, you know, as I started out saying, it was the first film that I made was Spirit of the Marathon, was a very personal film to me because I had run marathons. You know, it was directly inspired by my own personal experience, having run first the Los Angeles Marathon, where I'm originally from, and then other marathons. You know, I've run quite a number of marathons over the years, including the Chicago Marathon, which is one of my favorites. So, you know, I am a runner, and making films about the marathon is definitely, you know, it's something very of personal interest to me. It's personal.
Yeah, and for the Boston, how did you pull the rabbit out of your sleeve and get Matt Damon to give the voiceover, and get Jeff Beal to compose the music? That's magic.
Yeah, the idea of having a celebrity narrator for one of my documentaries, again, dates back to Spirit of the Marathon. I had once thought that maybe that film I would like to have a celebrity narrator for Spirit of the Marathon, which I never did. The film doesn't even have a narrator, and it plays fine like that. But when it came time to make Boston, we thought that it would be appropriate, that it would be useful in telling this long story of a race, that has over 100 years of history. And who would be a good person to do that, So Matt Damon was at the top of our list because he's originally from the Boston area. He grew up alongside the Boston Marathon course, watching his father and his brother run the race. So, it was definitely an event that he personally was familiar with and meant something to him and his family. It took a long time to get him involved. We were able to do it thanks to one of our film's executive producers, Frank Marshall. Frank, is the producer of many, many films, modern day classics, whether it be, Indiana Jones or Back to the Future, many of the films that we've all grown up with and loved. Frank is the producer of the Jason Bourne films, the Bourne Identity, which of course,
Bourne
Matt
trilogy.
Jason Bourne. So Frank also was very interested in the Boston Marathon because he had run the race in 1980. And so when he joined us as one of the executive producers of the film, he was the one to make the call to Matt and ask if he would narrate the film, and that's how it happened.
That's awesome. It's a pretty good story. And what are the biggest challenges of writing a script for these films? How do you go about it? Do you go with the script, or is it?
Well, these being true documentary films, it's very hard to literally script them. I do the best that I can. I always, before I set out to make a film, I outline it in as detailed a way as I possibly can. So, including even putting in potential dialogue, what somebody might say, or what I'd like to maybe hear somebody say, when I do an interview. So I've always done that. That's always been a part of my process. And then basically what happens is, you can have this script, this outline that's ready to go, but as soon as you start rolling the camera, it pretty much goes out the window because everything changes. It's just the way of it, but it's good to have because for a couple of reasons. One, you've thought all the way through, the story and the process, so it's a great exercise from that standpoint. And it's also, it's something to go off of. It doesn't mean you have to stick to it, but it is a kind of a roadmap that you can come back to, throughout the process, which we do all the way through production and post-production when we're editing, always referring back to my original ideas. So, my personal process, scripting, so to speak, a documentary film is just to create a very detailed outline, which, is maybe, in feature film, fiction writing, we have kind of a formula that we generally say, a page a minute, so a 90-minute film would be 90 pages. I create, outlines for a documentary that might be 40 pages or something like that. But it's, it's detailed stuff. It's not, just lines and lines of dialogue.
Got it. And do you have plans to go around world and make films on marathons that happen in major cities like Berlin and all? Because Hyderabad Runners is very active and they run all over the world. So we want your advice. what should they do to catch your attention while you're filming? Should they wear earrings? Should they leave their hair or tie their hair, or how to catch their attention? They run all over the world.
Well, as I said, I had only started out thinking I would make one film about the marathon, and it turned into 3. So I'm not currently planning on making any more feature films about running. I'm working on other projects right now. That being said, I am interested in the possibility of creating a series about running. And again, certainly one of the themes, one of the areas of interest I have is showcasing running, in a global light. So not just running as it takes place in the United States or Europe, but globally. And as I mentioned earlier, I've visited India a number of times and have really enjoyed my time there. It was around this time last year that I was there, that Hyderabad runners graciously invited me, and I came and participated and ran the 10K. I was not in marathon shape at that time, but I ran the 10K, and I absolutely loved it. It was my first time in Hyderabad, and if I am able to realize the idea of making some kind of a series on running, I'm very, very interested in trying to involve the
So
Indian.
you must be aware that Bollywood Indian film industry is one of the largest. So do you have plans to make a Bollywood film? Even Hyderabad is big on film. I think you should come over and make some films here.
Well, I would, of course, I know of the Bollywood industry. I don't know. I hope I'm able to do something like this, because it's something that would be of great interest to me. Specifically creating a new production around running that would involve India. But we'll see. There's a lot that needs to happen in order to make that come to life.
Yeah. This is a question from Pradeep. This is about what are the 10 best documentaries or films on running that you suggest? At least name 5.
Oh yeah, 5.
That doesn't include your list, Jon.
Well, I'm very proud of my films. I would recommend anybody watch my films. So there's 3 right there. But others, one of my great inspirations was the official Olympic film for the 1964 Olympics in Tokyo, Japan. The film is made by the late great Japanese filmmaker Kon Ichikawa, and the marathon sequence, which you see a little bit of footage from in Spirit of the Marathon, in which the Ethiopian great Abebe Bikila ran and won his 2nd consecutive Olympic marathon, is featured in that film, and it's brilliant filmmaking. It's so artfully done. Not only the running, but just the whole film that features, a variety of different sports, that were a part of those Olympics. And so that for me is like always the gold standard. I love Tokyo Olympiad. It's a brilliant work of art, a brilliant filmmaker. Other more recent films, friends and colleagues made a film called Skid Row Marathon, which is about a Superior Court judge in Los Angeles that has started a running program for a very difficult part of downtown Los Angeles called Skid Row, where there are a lot of people living on the streets that have lost jobs, lost family, have substance abuse problems, mental issues, what have you. but through running have, started to get back up on their feet again. And so this film Skid Row Marathon, it's a feature documentary. I would encourage, people to check it out. It's really well done and really wonderful to watch.
Sure. Thanks, John. And Pradeep has another question. Why didn't you release your films online on OTT platforms for Indian viewers?
Over the years, since I made Spirit of the Marathon, and Spirit of the Marathon was released in cinemas in 2008, so much has changed. Mostly, the world of distribution has completely changed. And back then, Netflix was a DVD mailing service that I think was only in the United States. So, they had a catalog that you could take a look at online, and you would select your films online, and they'd arrive a couple of days later in the mail on a DVD. And then there was a pre-addressed, paid for envelope. You when you were done watching, you put the DVD back in it and then send it back and then get your next film. And that's how Netflix started. And that's what it was like when Spirit of the Marathon was released, and people are still going to cinemas, much more so than they do nowadays. Cinema attendance in the United States has diminished dramatically in recent years, because so many people nowadays, of course, are looking at alternatives to, whether it be Netflix or Amazon or, there's so many different ways of watching film from the comfort of your own home. So I would say, at least for the first two films, the world of distribution was very different back then. And they are available on different platforms now. Boston is distributed by a very large distributor called Lionsgate, and Lionsgate is responsible for putting it into different countries, and it's in a lot of different countries. Although I understand India is not one of them. So that's something we need to work on, because again, India is of personal interest to me, and I would definitely like to make the films more available there. I know I've met people in India that have seen at least the first two films, that have gotten their hands on the DVDs, but I would love to make them available on streaming platforms somehow.
Great. Thanks, John. And Rajesh has a question. You have traveled all over the world shooting footage from different marathons. Is there any inspiring event, any incident that has that you have an emotional attachment to?
Is there any? I didn't hear the first part.
An emotional attachment to that incident or footage that you shot across marathons in the world?
That's a really that's a great question. I mean, there's a lot, of course, but I think what always gets me is most recently with Boston. I actually, in the course of making Boston, I made a couple of trips to Australia. I thought I was only going to be able to go once, and I went. I made that trip, but there were some things that I had wanted to capture that I couldn't, and because the production was going on longer than I thought it was going to, I had the opportunity to go back and to get some of the things that I wanted to get, which was specifically filming with the 1986 champion of the Boston Marathon, was the one and only Australian to have ever won the race, Rob de Castella. And after his career as a professional runner, he started something called the Indigenous Marathon Project, where he's helping to train young men and women from the Indigenous community around Australia to run the marathon, to run major marathons. and I wanted to film with Rob and the IMP. And so when I had the chance to go back to Australia, I did that, and I loved that experience so much. Rob de Castella is a true champion, not only because of his CV as a runner, but as a person, is really an amazing person, and has created an amazing program with the Indigenous Marathon Project. And it was just such a special time to be able to go there and spend time with them and to film that sequence that's in Boston. So yeah, that's very special to me.
Great, thanks. And let's come back to a running question. How much time do you allocate for running and filmmaking in a week? Which gets a bigger priority? There are 168 hours in a week. So which gets a bigger priority for Jon?
Yeah. I'm a runner to the core. I just love running. So I'm always a runner. But filmmaking is my profession. So, I definitely spend the majority of my time with filmmaking. I'm also a father. I have a 3-year-old son. So a lot of my running is spending time with and chasing my little boy around. So I'm not able to get out and do the runs like I once did. I do still try to maximize my time and, get up early in the morning and, sneak something in before my family wakes up. But it's challenging, just kind of balancing between, family, work, running. But to answer your question, certainly family and work, are the priorities, and I fit the running around them where I can.
Chaitanya has a question for you. When Jon, the filmmaker and runner, is not working on both, what kind of sports films does he like to watch, or what kind of sports does he like to play, if not running and filmmaking?
Well, I like I love sports, in general. I love cycling. I'm huge into cycling. I was really into cycling before I was into running, and I would also very much like to make one or more cycling films one day. As I mentioned earlier, I live here in Europe, so cycling is very big here in Europe. Here in Italy, we have a major historical event similar in age to the Boston Marathon, the Giro d'Italia. It's basically, it's Italy's Tour de France. So I would love to make a film, about the Giro d'Italia someday, if I have that opportunity. I'd love to make a film, about the Tour de France. So, we'll see where those ideas go. But yeah, I definitely love cycling as well.
Yeah. So you've been making films for a while now. How has the technology changed, in terms of cameras? Like, do you use those red cameras, or do you use HD SLR kind of cameras? And now even phones have, good cameras. So how do you mix and match those to get the right kind of footage that you want?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, technology, of course, has changed dramatically and over my career as a filmmaker. I mean, when I studied film in university, we were still filming on film, celluloid film. And I had a class when we did my first production class, when we edited the film, we were physically cutting the film and taping it back together again, and that's how we edited. Very old school style by today's standards. When it came to video, it was originally analog, and it was tape to tape, recording from one machine to the other. So I've seen a lot of changes with technology, but I'd say that I have a couple of thoughts. One being in spite of all of the obvious changes, of huge changes of technology in terms of acquisition, I think what's been more surprising to me has been actually the revolution in distribution and the way that people consume films, and the fact that, you know, there was a time, I mean, I grew up with, you know, going to the cinema and watching a feature-length film, or watching, you know, a film on HBO. In the United States, you know, we have HBO on TV, or watching, you know, episodic television, kind of a very, you know, classical way of viewing things in a sense. But now it's just all over the map. You know, a lot of people, I talk to younger people these days, and, you know, they don't even hardly watch feature films. They watch, you know, so many people watch things on YouTube, and attention spans are much shorter. You know, people are busy. We have limited time. So, you know, format, distribution, those are things that have changed just hugely since I first became interested in making films. Back
Do
when I
you
was
have, sorry to interrupt you, John. So do you have a challenge while distributing your films that it has to be in particular format, or they go with the content? How does that work?
well, when I say format, what I'm actually talking about is, you know, are we talking about a short film, or a feature film, or a series, you know, as opposed to, you know, what camera was it shot with, you know. But, you know, when we're talking about cameras and technology and that kind of thing, you know, when I was younger and studying film in film school, I always loved the technical aspect of filmmaking. I was always, you know, very hands-on with filming and editing also. And I remember hearing, you know, my professors would say things like, you know, just don't worry so much about the technology. What's really most important is the story. And, you know, being a young, naive film student, I was kind of like, story. Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're always making, you know, that's what film is, you know, we're storytelling, right? But yeah, what kind of camera are we going to shoot this with? That was kind of my naive attitude, you know, 30 years ago. But over time, you know, you mature, and you live life. And I really, you know, have come to realize so much more, like, you know, it doesn't matter what you film it with. It really is about the story and how you tell the story, you know, your point of view. There's so many other aspects to filmmaking that are important. I mean, everybody loves to look at, you know, pretty pictures, for sure. But it's really the story that connects us. And so that's where my focus is. I mean, you know, I mean, I've got a beautiful new iPhone sitting right here next to me as we speak, and I can go outside and, you know, take beautiful images with it right now and edit them together, and, you know, it's never been easier. But it doesn't mean anything if I'm not telling a great story, and I'm not telling it in a good way. So
that's a good way to put it. You know, the content is king. If you get the right connect with the audience, then you're there. We have another question from Dr. Bopi. He's asking if you are looking at any collaboration with running authors, you know, for making your documentaries or films or series in future.
With running authors specifically.
Yeah.
Well, I've always worked with authors, you know, some of the great minds in running. I mean, throughout all of my films, I've always done interviews with people that have written about running. So yeah, I mean, that's always been a part of what I've done. And if I am able to make, you know, perhaps a series, I would imagine that, you know, one or more authors in the running world, you know, I'd certainly certainly want to work with in some capacity.
Awesome. I have a question from Sundar. He's an avid runner and film enthusiast. He's asking if there is a possibility of collaborating with you on script writing or anything. He wants to get involved in filmmaking, on running.
Well, we should see. You know, I keep coming back to India. I mean, I really very much would like to make a film that involves you know, the Indian running community. So you know, we'll see where that process goes, and then you know, we'll see what kinds of opportunities are there. But you know, if I am fortunate, I'm able to do something like that, I'll certainly need a lot of help in India.
Okay. So we have a question on this is a question from me, like, you know, do you, when you make these marathon films, are there any retakes, takes kind of a thing, like, or is everything candid, like on the location? Do you?
Well, it depends on what we're filming, of course. You know, when we film a Boston Marathon, when you film a marathon, I mean, there are no retakes, obviously. You know,
yeah.
They're not going to all line back up at the starting line and do it over for you. So
maybe while they're flashing their medal or something, do you do something like that, or?
Occasionally, yeah. If I'm able to, yeah, sometimes. I mean, there are people that it's an interesting discussion, because, you know, we're talking about kind of documentary realism and, you know, what is truth in documentary filmmaking. You know, where do you draw the line, you know, between, you know, with how you're manipulating things, you know, whether it be in the filming process or the editing, you know, the juxtaposition of scenes and images and things like that. But, you know, the reality is documentary filmmaking, even though, you know, we all have this idea of it being a, you know, all real, you know, it's all completely manipulated, even though, you know, maybe we're filming with people who aren't professional actors most of the times. It's a process that's highly manipulated from the start, you know, from the decision of what are we going to make a film about and how are we going to tell that story. You know, I made this film about the Boston Marathon, and my film is about the marathon, you know, whereas somebody else and productions have been made about the bombings and just about the bombings. So there already is, you know, is part of the decision-making process, you know, like how much are we going to talk about the bombings? How much or how little are we going to talk about the bombings? You're manipulating things, you know, from the beginning. So yeah, I mean, there are occasions where, you know, we may ask somebody to do something over again. I try and keep it as natural and, you know, quote unquote truthful as I can. But yeah, I mean, we film a lot of stuff and don't always get it right, and sometimes have to do it over again.
Yeah, so I have one last question to you, Jon, before we wrap up the session. This question is from Revati. So, like, what happened in Boston, right? The bombings. Did that change your vision to make the film? I'm sure you must have thought of making it in a certain fashion, but something has happened, and the vision of the film that you want to make must have changed, right? So, did that happen anytime, barring the Boston thing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it changed everything. As I mentioned earlier, originally, before the bombings, I thought I was going to make a film that was going to tell the story of the Boston Marathon. And then when the bombings occurred, of course, it changed. You know, everybody was focused on the bombings. And even to this day, you know, sadly, you know, there are certainly a lot of people that if you say Boston Marathon, you know, they don't think about the long history of the race, they think about, oh, that's, you know, where the bombings occurred. So, and as I said, I never, my interest was never in making a film about the bombings. But what I ultimately decided to do was, you know, tell the story of the race, and you had to talk about the bombings. It, you know, became a part of the race history, but also to incorporate the year following, which was every bit as important, you know. So we had this incredibly tragic, you know, dark episode in the race's history, which many people were injured and lives were lost. And then coming back a year later, and it was a beautiful day and triumphant and glorious, and you know, just wonderful display of human spirit. So so yeah, the idea changed dramatically after the bombings occurred, and you know, we basically did the best that we could to kind of, you know, weave both that as well as the year following, you know, into what I had always wanted to do.
But that didn't deter the spirit of marathoners. They run all over the world. Nothing deters, right? Nothing stops them from running. Nothing stops them from running marathons.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's in us. I mean, that's the whole nature. That's what running a marathon is about, right? I mean, it's, nobody runs a marathon because it's easy.
Yeah.
You know, that's the experience, and you know, when things are hard, you know, you have to dig deep and look for that inner strength that, you know, you discover you didn't have. You know, that's what running the marathon is about, and
great.
You know, that's what these films have been about, is also.
Yeah. Thank you, Jon, for your time, and we would love to see you again in Hyderabad Marathon very soon. I would like to invite Shubhajit to give vote of thanks. Shubhajit, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Pawan, for the Q&A facilitation. Friends, it was yet another informative and enriching 1 hour. We hope you enjoyed attending the event as much as we did in organizing it. A few key insights from Jon's talk was that he talked about running and filmmaking. They both are a different ball game, but when you actually have a passion for one, you can turn it into a profession. Lovely talk from him and the visual delights from Jon. I think making most of the runners nostalgic of your videos of the spirit of marathon in Boston, seeing that crowd together, kind of congregating now that the situations are a little tough. Thank you so much for that visual delight, and about your life, how you started as a 15 years young runner, and then followed your passion for filmmaking, and that how you traveled the world and clicked on and making films. And one thing we've understood that it's as challenging as we actually prepare for a marathon. It's even more challenging to do a filmmaking. I think it goes a lot of storytelling, a lot of technology, and a lot of platform now in terms of distribution. So the end-to-end process, I think, Jon, you've really put it in a beautiful way. I'm sure that some of the runners might take this up as a thinking challenge to actually move and articulate in the world of filming too. Thanks for that, and also your all the three films making a grand success. So also we are really glad to learn that you're interested in filming, doing a film on cycling, and we would sooner than later see you also. Love to see you in Hyderabad with your cameras and relishing on the local cuisines here. Thanks, Jon. I think it's been a total 1 hour of delight, and have a great future ahead, and all the best for your future endeavors. We'd love to see more films. So once again, our deepest gratitude for taking time out and sharing your experiences and learning with us today. Indeed, it's great to know that you have combined your passion again with running and filmmaking, and turned out into a beautiful profession for all to cherish. And also a special thanks to our audience today for choosing the time to spend with us. Please feel free to ask any more questions you have for Jon in the comment section, and we'll work it out to get you the answers. The recording of this event will be available on our Hyderabad Runners Facebook, as well as the Airtel Hyderabad Marathon YouTube page. Please come back to watch again and share it on your social media profiles and to others who can benefit by tagging us on hashtag Hyderabad Runners and hashtag Beyond the Track. Before we wind up, we would request all members to follow the government advisories to be safe and healthy, considering that the number of cases are increasing rapidly. We will be back next Saturday with yet another expert and yet another interesting topic for you. Just as you marked Sunday mornings 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. for the Sunday long run week after week, you can now mark your Saturday evening 7:30 to 8:30 for Beyond the Track webinars. We hope to see you every Saturday. Until then, this is Subhajit from Hyderabad Runners signing off. Stay safe and stay healthy. Bye to Jon, and bye to all the participants today. Thank you.